Not everything is going to be for everyone in the world of Monster Hunter. It makes sense, to be honest. 14 weapons, countless skills, a bunch of monsters, you all know the taglines. At some point somewhere or another, there's going to be something that just doesn't work for you. Rarely is there a point where the inclusion of a new mechanic or skill hits that point for the majority though. Clutch Claw got its fair share of flack, some justified and some not, and let's be honest, who aside from the most desperate of Twitter gremlins said that they enjoyed egg quests, really? And that's what today's video is about. As you've probably guessed from the title, Escaton Judgement was a neat little addition to Alatreon's inclusion in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. I'm Cera, and here's a look back on why I reckon Escaton Judgement did nothing wrong. Alatreon blasted into the secluded valley on July 9th, 2020. You all know what the deal is here: elementally unstable, shifted between fire mode and ice mode, and used a third dragon mode to go between the two. Aggressive, fast, but completely revamped as a base fight between its last appearance in GU. Alatreon ruled. Clear, crisp hitboxes, threatening attack patterns that you had to be on top of your game to avoid, but rewarded you for respecting its attacks and punishing its openings. An all-round complete facelift and one of the best fights, purely from the basic combat alone. However, this wasn't all. Escaton Judgement, a sort of ultimate attack, was introduced. It was a powerful tick damage attack that covered the entire area, quickly chipping down Hunter's health as Alatreon exited Dragon Mode. Just about the only thing you could do whilst that bomb went off was chug down healing items and pray that your gullet was wide enough to save you from the heat. Some speedruns have been able to achieve what's known as a pre-EJ clear, which, before you start making dick jokes, stands for pre-Escaton Judgement. This required an extraordinary amount of damage, and would be very unlikely for the average player to see. Thus, you'd always see it at least once or twice per hunt, meaning that a lot of players were required to deal with it. So, how does one deal with Escaton? Simple. Alatreon controls the elements, so why not give it a taste of its own medicine? Essentially, dealing enough elemental damage to the thing will eventually cause an elemental topple, staggering Alatreon and sending it flying. Each topple had a knock-on effect of reducing Escaton's damage, up to a maximum of 3, by which point a single Mega Potion could easily out-heal the Nova. We have actually seen something similar before. Ebony Odegaron also rewarded players who chose to bring Element, having a unique face break if you managed to deal enough said damage. Really cool mechanic in my opinion, and pay attention to this, because it'll be important later. Speaking of important points, I'd just like to direct you to the tips and tutorials section of the menu. Prepare yourself for quests, consider everything, even the skills and weapon element for the job at hand. Just something to note. Bruh. 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 Jesus Christ. People hated it. Hated it. The fact that you needed to bring an element and play slightly aggressively? Absolutely not. No way were people happy about that. Why forced mechanics in games? Cried the Redditor. Why do I have to make a completely different set? Screamed the Steam forums. I hate women, yelled Facebook comments, but in hindsight I don't think that was about Alatreon. The point is, people were pissed, seriously pissed. Time and time again a hunt would be lost, solo or multiplayer, to this elemental storm. Alatreon wouldn't topple, horns would stay intact, and therefore, before anything could be done, they'd be sent back to Celiana in a wheelchair. And at this point, this is where the video boils down. It comes down to this one main point. People didn't like being told they had to do something. At this point, Raging Brachydios had just released, and a lot of hunters were mainlining the natural purple high raw blast combination that caters to all their needs, so to be punished for bringing the Brachy weapons, something that had worked perfectly fine up until this point, was offensive. Or rather, it would have been. You see, I was thinking about this. You've got the tutorial messages telling you to consider elements as an important part of your preparation. You've got the two main bits of dialogue at the start of the Alatreon fight, non-elemental weapons being ineffective, and 2 tips pages telling you about the importance of element. There's no gaps in information, the game is telling you what it needs to happen for you to succeed. You wouldn't look at the big glowing eye on a Zelda boss and say, "Ah, no thanks, I'd rather hit it in the arsehole," would you? So at this point, if you are the party that refuses to bring an element weapon, that's on you. Plus, as mentioned a couple of times by the official Twitter account of all things, Kulve Taroth and Safi Jiva were all in the game at this point and rotating their quests. Kiar weapons? plus Safi armor was the perfect combination to take this monster down. Everything was in place for you to be appropriately geared before taking on this fight. So, what gives? Well, one mistake I believe the Alatreon quest did do was make it available at Master Rank 24. Having a fight like this that requires serious grinding and player skill pretty much open to new players fresh out of the story is just setting them up for failure in my opinion. It should have been at least after Ruin and Gigante at Master Rank 100. Now let me say this next part very clearly. Alatreon is an endgame Black Dragon G-level menace. It is supposed to be hard. It's meant to challenge, punish, and force players to get better to beat it, so that conquering such a threatening monster feels like an accomplishment after grinding up your gear. To say that such a fight should be immediately clearable for the average player at story's end diminishes the importance of the thing I feel. This is not your average Redditor get good comment. This is a clear understanding of what the monster should be and where its place in the game should sit. Now that leads us on finally to those that can read tips and adapt to the game. Why were the people bringing the correct elemental stats still failing? Simple. They weren't being aggressive enough. Every weapon could reliably and safely hit the elemental topple at least once, which made a hell of a difference to Escaton. Yes, every weapon, even Greatsword. Alatreon's elemental modifier compensated for each weapon, which is why Chargeblade files did next to nothing towards it, and Greatsword got a 10% boost to allow for the slow hits. Hell, even the snowball item that you got from an event could get a topple by itself, which Cantapermi, everybody's favourite speedrunner, showed off on their Twitter. Now, with all this evidence, the only possible conclusion is that it wasn't Escaton itself to blame, rather the inability to adapt. Even if all the recommendations were followed, people were just finding a difficult fight, well, difficult. Escaton merely existed as punctuation to reinforce the fact that they may have bought the wrong gear, or perhaps played too cautiously, and had much more severe consequences than the monster changing areas or powering up, and also became the scapegoat from here for this difficulty. Besides, there was also the option of taking a raw set solo and just carting to Escaton, and that gives you 3 total with insurance. If you get any more than 3 Escatons, then your damage was definitely low enough. And that's what I reckon. Escaton Judgement, and by extension Alatreon, did nothing wrong at all. And even if you geared right, it was supposed to be tough. I mean, come on. You thought a monster that was grouped in with Fatalis and Diamoralis in the same classification was going to be a pushover? Think again. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I do hope that my point came across about how Escaton wasn't the problem. If perchance I've offended you, and you yourself did have difficulty and believe it due to be Escaton Judgement, I would love to hear you explain why you believe it was the worst in the comments. No sarcasm intended. I'll be looking out for some opinions there. And hell, here's an idea. How about some of you try to take that quest again? Fire up world, bring your best element sets, go against Alatreon and see what happens. Let me know how you get on. Until next time fellas, peace.